G'day, Dave here, and we're looking at Titus chapter 1, verse 15 and 16. Let me read them for you. To the pure, everything is pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. In fact, both their mind and conscience are defiled. They claim to know God, but they deny him by their works. They're detestable, disobedient, and unfit for any good work. Now let's put that back into context. Paul has been calling Titus to appoint elders within the churches in the island of Crete. And it's important for him to put elders in place, to have overseers in the churches, so that the people can be fed the truth, so that they can be taught true, healthy doctrine. And, of course, this is to lead into the way that they live, so their lives are lives of godliness. It flows from the gospel message of Jesus into the way that they live and they treat each other. By contrast, there are some people that have infiltrated the churches, and they are teaching an external that doesn't translate into changed lives, attitudes, and behaviours. Really, it's going through the motions, it's performing rituals, it's ceremonial, and doesn't have any power to transform people. And so you get this dichotomy, this kind of people who on the one hand seem to be genuine and real because they've got all the religious forms and practices, and yet at the same time they're evil, they're lazy, they're gluttonous, they're just like the society around about them. I wonder if you've seen the movie. It's got Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks in it. Catch Me If You Can. It actually tells the story of a young man who's such a good con that he's able to persuade people at the age of 17, 18, that he's an international pilot, that he's a medical doctor, and that he's a lawyer, a prosecutor in the court system. And he succeeds, it's based on a true story, succeeds in defrauding people out of huge sums of money and basically living a life that's just a sham. And the movie is involved in trying to catch him out in his schemes. He's very good at it, based on a true story. But one of the things that we see within the church, there are people who can seem to be the real thing. They might be a minister in the church. They could even be a bishop or an important church leader. They could dress in the right clothing. They can go along to the right buildings and they can go through all the right sorts of rituals, but it's not changing the way that they live. We need to dig into what it is that's shaping people. What is it that they truly believe? What is it they're teaching? And does that translate into a genuine godliness? Titus is concerned that we understand that godliness is the fruit of the gospel, and that once we come to grips with what God has done for us through Jesus, we're going to have changed minds, changed lips, changed actions. That's the way that it works. Now, religion can so easily be simply a performance. One of the graphic scenes of this, quote another movie, in The Godfather, where you've got in this incredibly kind of eerie Martin Scorsese movie about the Italian Godfather there in America, a scene where there's the baptism of a baby, and it's intercut with murder taking place, where people are being shot, people are being killed, and basically the Godfather is taking over the terrain, all while having the alibi of being at church for the baptism of a baby. Friends, that's pretty extreme, but I wonder whether it's actually highlighting what can be true perhaps in lesser ways for so many people. It comes to Sunday. We say the prayers, there's the confession, there's kneeling, there's genuflecting, there's singing, there's sitting down and dressing up and listening to the message, and then there's the leaving of church. And there's the going out into the world, back into the home, back into the workplace, back onto the sporting field, back down the roads, back out into the economy, back into the real world where the religion has no bearing, where people live as they please, where they're stealing from the boss, where they're watching pornography, where they're cheating on their income tax, where they're drinking to excess, where they're indulging in gossip. And they go to church and they hear the message and they pray and they read and they kneel, and then they do it all again the following week. Friends, this is not the way it's to be. And sadly, there are those who teach within the church who display such hypocrisy. It's nothing but external performance. And the way to lead the church in righteousness, in godliness, is to make sure that we appoint, that we raise up leaders who will teach the truth and model the truth. What's going on in their heart will flow out into the way that they live their lives. And in verses 15 and 16 here, that's the message that we see. A transformed heart is what will produce good fruit. It's not the outside coming in, it's the inside coming out. See, to the pure, everything is pure. If your heart is pure, then you will approach things in a pure way. But to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing's pure. In fact, their mind and their conscience are defiled. They might claim to know God, but they deny him by their works. They're detestable, disobedient, and unfit for any good work. You see, there's a type of teaching that produces this kind of hypocrisy. Elders are called to teach and to refute, to encourage and to silence. You need to both highlight the truth and oppose the error. And how can you tell the fake? Well, as we've seen already, it's by knowing the truth. That's the key thing. As I mentioned previously, those who want to detect counterfeit dollar notes equip themselves well by constantly studying the real thing. If you know the real thing inside out, then you'll be able to spot the counterfeit. John Stott suggested that there are 3 tests that come in Titus 1 to understanding and knowing whether it is real or not, whether it is genuine gospel leading to genuine godliness, or whether it's just a pretense. Here are the tests. The first one is, where does the teaching or instruction come from? Where are they getting their message? Does it come from the Bible? Or does it come simply from human ideas, myths and traditions, church practices, rules and regulations? Where does it come from? Can you find it in the Bible? So we are to have the attitudes that get commended in the book of Acts. In Acts 17, the Berean church, they hear Paul come and open the scriptures and speak to him, and they test out what they've just heard. And they go back to the Bible to see whether or not what Paul said was true. We need to be like the Bereans. Don't just listen to your preacher. Don't just listen to your pastor, your minister, and believe everything that he says. Don't believe me. No, go back to the Bible and see, is that what is being said? We need to be people who discern the truth. Does the teaching come from the Bible, or is it merely human authority? Is it a good idea, or is it actually God's idea? That's the first thing. Second thing, is this fundamentally something that works on the inside and translates out to the outside? Because that's spiritual work, inside out. Not simply painting a veneer on the surface, not simply going through the motions. This is not simply changed behaviour. No, this is a transformed heart. That's when you know that you're dealing with the real thing. Thirdly, does it lead to transformed lives? Or does it ultimately make no difference? There's no change. And all you've got is the veneer, what the Bible would call a mask, or hypocrisy. You see, the true gospel leads to changed thinking, changed words, and changed lives. It brings about transformation. It leads us to be more and more like Jesus. We need to examine the teaching that we receive. And we need to examine, those of us who are teachers, what it is that we're teaching. Is it the Bible? Is it a word that comes from God, or is it simply my good ideas or some I've stolen from others? And this message that I've got that I'm trying to teach, am I aiming for the heart? Do I want to see transformation of the person? Well, I need God to be at work in doing that, don't I? So I need to pray that God will bring about real change in the lives of the people that I'm teaching, that he will transform us from the inside out. See, if it's simply behaviour modification that we're after, then we can manipulate and coerce people in all kinds of different ways. That's to be avoided. And lastly, are we looking for genuine transformation? Transformation that will lead to people looking at the person and being pointed to Christ. And so hearing the message from them and seeing it backed up in their actions. Here is a cycle. Here is the intertwining of the life and the doctrine, the walk and the talk. See, that's what Paul's asking for. That's what Titus is to call elders to do. That's what our leaders should do. That's what we should be training Christian leaders to be. Not simply people who know all the right forms and activities, but people who will work with God's word to see genuine, heart-led, transformed lives.